Welcome to Fright Fix. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the 2024 movie, The Deliverance, which is directed by Lee Daniels and stars Andra Day and Glenn Close. Celia, what do you think of Deliverance?
Well, I was really excited to review a new film because I think we've done quite a few of the classics or slightly older films recently. So we kind of just wanted to go for one of those Netflix horrors that have been coming out over the last few years. And I'd actually seen quite a few memes about this because of Glenn Close's character, which I totally see how memeable she is
Oh,
after
really?
watching
What did
it.
you see?
Yeah, I saw the bit where she gets possessed at
Yeah.
like at the end. There was loads of memes about being really hungover, and that's what you look like when you're really
Oh,
hungover.
yeah.
So I was interested to see this, and I do enjoy Glenn Close in stuff. So yeah, I have also seen Precious. I think that was the other Lee Daniels film. Have you seen that?
No, I've not seen it, no.
Which isn't a horror at all, but it's very moving.
Yeah.
And so I was excited to see that kind of very raw and real storytelling in
Yeah.
this film
Yeah.
as well because of the director. And so I started watching this film with quite high hopes. And it did, to start with, it did kind of meet those expectations in a way because I think that a lot of the build-up of this story was very realistic, and I really enjoyed getting to know the characters and the fact that they were all so flawed. So Ebony, who is the mother and the main character in this, this is a haunted house essentially, apparently a true story of a haunted house, and a mother and her three children live in this house with her mother or their grandmother, who's Glenn Close. And really, you could say that this is like any other horror film about a haunted house and possessions and whatnot. But what I really liked about it was the fact that Ebony and Alberta, her mother, are, like I said, very flawed. They are not necessarily good mothers in most senses. In fact, you feel really sorry for their three children because of, Ebony's an alcoholic. Alberta clearly used to be an alcoholic and is not a very nice person a lot of the time. And the three kids that live in that house suffer because of that.
Yeah.
But then you also see that people are multidimensional. Ebony works very hard to make sure that her children have what she never did as a child. Alberta does fiercely protect her family from anybody. And so you see this kind of full scope of what it means to be a family, although quite depressing and although something that you would never wish on anyone to have to experience. You do see what life is like for some people who live in this socioeconomic kind of standard in America, I would say. And that's very similar to Precious, where the main thing about that film is showing the reality of what it was like to live like Precious. So I really enjoyed those parts of the film, but when it came to the horror elements of this film, as in being a film about a house being haunted, demonic possessions, all that stuff, we've seen it all before, and I really did feel like I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but I was so bored of this film as a horror. In fact, I would have just preferred it to have been the story of this family and them trying to get back on their feet, and a story of redemption for Ebony, and working through her mother's cancer and all this stuff would have been an amazing film. And then it just divulges into this run-of-the-mill horror film where, yes, granted, it has a good few scares, but they're everything that we've seen before, like children being horribly rude and using the most awful language, throwing up, trying to kill each other, hurt themselves. Like it's every possession film that we've ever seen. An exorcist comes in and helps them get rid of it, and then lo and behold, that happens. It's just like, oh, I don't know if I just by the end was so disappointed with the fact that it didn't carry on with the same motivation that it started with, that I just ended it and went, okay, it's done. So yeah, that's my, like, I don't know how long that was, a minute overview of what I thought. What did you think?
And that's all for today's episode.
Really?
You, I'm not lying to you. I've got a paragraph of notes here, and you have literally. I'm going to read it out to you,
Okay,
yeah.
do it.
And
Yeah.
this is scary how similar it is to yours. I mean, kind of like. All right. So what I wrote is it's an attempt at a horror movie by a director I don't feel is very comfortable with horror direction. It has good drama, but the horror felt very derivative.
Yeah.
As a story about abuse and a turbulent family drama, I thought it was great, but horror, no. How
Yeah.
similar is that
That's so
to
similar.
what you just said?
Yeah, spot on. I mean, what I will say is that this film shows me how important it is to have strong actors, because all of
Yes.
them did such a good job in the film, I think. I don't think any of them fell flat. Andra Day Ebony was incredible. I hated her,
Yes.
I loved her, I hated her, I loved her. It was so
Yeah.
hard to put your finger on what you thought of her. I mean, Glenn Close was incredible. Again, somebody
She
where I'm
stole the
like,
show. She
she
definitely
absolutely
stole
stole
it.
the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so having that does make you think, if this was a B horror movie, as we kind of think it is, and it also had terrible acting, I wouldn't even give this 1 star, but it had
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'd never seen Andra Day in anything before. I'm not familiar with her, but man, I'm like after watching this movie, I'm like totally in love with her. Like in terms of
Yeah.
her acting and stuff. Like she is like, yeah, yeah. She's phenomenal. And Glenn Close, oh my goodness, like that's just a genius move in casting. Like getting her to
Yeah.
play like she almost felt like a black woman in a white person's body almost.
Yeah.
And I'd read somewhere that the original like true story or whatever that this is based on, the Glenn Close character in real life was a black lady. So I found
Oh,
that yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So the grandmother was a black lady. So I thought it was quite interesting why they chose to race swap her to a white woman.
And they do
And
talk about that a little bit in when they're having arguments about, because like Ebony makes some sort of comment about her mother sleeping with black men and something like about her past.
yeah,
And Alberta talks about her like not thinking that way, or you shouldn't be thinking that way, and that we're
mm,
family, you're my child. And I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
quite an interesting way of looking at mixed race families and dynamics when
mm,
everybody else in her family is black, and then the grandmother is white,
yeah,
but then their culture is very similar. Like you said, she has like her characteristics, the way that she dresses is very different, like isn't very different from what you'd expect. So like it's maybe they did that so that they could start talking about the multi dimensions of families that aren't all the same, but definitely, like you say, was an artistic choice for a reason. And
yeah, yeah.
I know
Sorry.
that Andra Day, I haven't seen it, but it was in another Lee Daniels film, which was about Billie Holiday. And I
Mhm.
would like to see that now, because she was so amazing in this. I'd like to
Yeah,
see her in a film that does her justice. Because like
yeah.
by the end I'd kind of thought, "Oh, the horror isn't for Lee Daniels, unfortunately."
No, 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 absolutely, yeah. I mean, I felt like Glenn Close's character just fit in,
Mm,
despite like the race change from the real life story. Like, yeah, it just added a different dimension to the family dynamic, and I quite enjoyed watching the how the two late, the mother and daughter didn't get on,
mm,
and how that kind of like how Andra Day kind of talked, made loads of references to how Glenn Close wasn't a good mother growing up.
yeah.
Every time Glenn Close tried to crap on Andra Day's mothering techniques, she
Hmm.
just kind of threw it back. So it was that all felt very real. Like it felt like I bet there's so many people that have that kind of things about their parents, the way they treat them,
Mm,
that they didn't appreciate or didn't like or whatever. And yeah, it's funny because yeah, I didn't enjoy the horror stuff at the end. I just
mm,
thought it was like we've seen this done better, like in
yeah.
like the Conjuring movies or
Yeah.
various other movies, various other horror movies. But right at the very end, when the screen goes black and they say something like, "Oh, this was based on a true story" or whatever, I almost forgot that it was based on a true story, and it almost made me kind of just forgive the movie a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I read up on the original horror story or whatever and it didn't to me it just wasn't very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to crap on anyone's life experience or something, but it just there wasn't much there wasn't much in it that I found compelling,
Mm,
and that I would read it and think, wow, this needs to be a horror movie. I need to do this movie. And the only thing I could think of was it's just not often you hear I read horror stories or read about horror experience that are like through the eyes of a black person.
mm,
And I think that's what makes it, or I can imagine that's probably what attracted the team to make this movie, because it's just, you just don't see it. Like, how many horror
yeah.
movies have we seen where it's that single white woman or
Mm,
the long suffering white woman mother or whatever, So it was
yeah.
interesting to have like an all black cast in a exorcism movie, which
Definitely.
is
And I
something
think
we've not
that's,
seen before.
you're so right. And that's what I was kind of excited for with this film, was that it had started off so strong when it came to talking about what it was like to be a struggling family, but also also a struggling Black family, and all of the dynamics that went into that.
Yeah.
The neighborhood that they lived in, the dynamics that they had with their neighbors, the dynamics that were within the household. And I was excited to see how they were then going to bring the horror elements into it. And I really thought that it was going to be more tied to the central themes of the story. And there were elements of that, like the bit that I was talking about earlier about the possession, where so Glenn Close's character dies at the hands of this demon, and then the demon takes her form, and starts talking to Ebony about, taunting her and being horrible to her, which again we've seen so many times in different films where like the demon is playing with them and trying to, get
The
them
Exorcist.
to break. It's everywhere. But I thought that could have been a really good way of bringing the horror elements in while also keeping this kind of like fraught family dynamic as the central point of the film. And I think you're exactly right what you said earlier about it feels like Lee Daniels is delving into a genre that he's not used to, and has unfortunately just missed the mark on it by trying to lean too much on what is already available. Like if you look at someone like Jordan Peele, he changed what horror was at the time. Like he did things that were different. He brought comedy in, and actually a lot of conversations about race in his films, but he did it in a way that was so, like if you think about is it Us? Yeah, Us.
Yeah.
Is that what's called? That was such a good example of like bringing in what he was clearly passionate about, and like what he wanted to talk about, and then make such a creepy horror film at the same time,
visually and textually.
And psychologically, like really affects you. Whereas this feels like it's a piggyback off the genre and putting your name on it, and it just feels, not to be too mean, but it just feels basic, and
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. It's a shame, because if the horror element was a bit more tighter or a bit more, I don't know, a bit more competent, it would have been a good movie. I mean, the thing is, the acting and the story and everything was great. Like I really enjoyed the dynamic between the kids, and there were some moments where the kids were genuinely creepy. And I mean, kids are, that's like a get out of jail free card. Add them to any horror movie and it'll become creepy. There were some moments, but just the third act of the movie, it just dropped the ball a little bit. I mean, what I was hoping for, so when the Andra Day's in the basement with the demon, I was hoping for some kind of revelation about what had happened to Andra when she was a kid, because I think I'm assuming she was abused or something. That's what it kind of alludes to. But I was kind of hoping with some of that past or she'd kind of make peace with her past somehow throughout the. But the thing I really didn't like this at the end of the film, where suddenly she becomes this super mega Christian who starts speaking in tongues and like starts, she becomes an exorcist herself or whatever, and battles the demon like that. And I'm like, there was no precedent for this throughout the movie. Like it wasn't even hinted at that, oh, maybe when she was younger she was a devout Christian and then she'd walked away from it. Maybe that would have made a bit more sense, because then it coming back, at the end would have been like, okay, she's going back to it, she's reclaiming that. But it was just like, it just came out of nowhere. Like it is just I mean, okay, there's a scene where her and the exorcist lady, are praying together or whatever, but that wasn't enough. That's not, that wasn't enough of a build up to that bit, and I just found that whole bit at the end just to be really pathetic. And
you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. I completely agree. And it made me annoyed that it felt like the moral of the story was, you've just got to be super religious and then none of this stuff's going to happen to you. It was like, and like you said, that was not a theme in the film whatsoever.
Came out of nowhere.
And both of us, we're absolutely happy to watch a film that has a lot of religious like motivations in it. Of course we are, but that's not what this film does. This film is, if she, like you say, if she had been grappling with her religion, or that it had in some way affected her life, and that she uses it at the end to kind of, help her through, that's very different from just like, I don't know, almost being like, well, you can do whatever you want, but as long as you speak in tongues and you let God into your life, that you'll be fine at the end. It's like, what's the
there
message?
Was no setup for it. There was no setup. I think that's what the problem was. And and then at the end, when her and the child services person are talking about, oh, you've got yourself into trouble, it's going to take us it's going to be difficult to resolve this case with the judge and all that stuff. And then Andra Day is like, oh, well, I don't know, she makes some reference to, I believe believe in whatever
It's God's plan.
path,
Yeah.
God's plan, or and like, dude, where is this? Like you, like it's like suddenly she's a totally different character to the one we've
Yeah.
seen throughout the first couple of acts of the movie. Yeah, I don't know.
It would have
Yeah,
been, I think it would have been so much nicer if we'd seen, not like take the religious element out of it, but she'd managed to get rid of the demon, and that the next scene is her in rehab, or her like doing something to better herself that didn't just happen. Maybe it opened her eyes to the fact that she needs to get something under control, or like she's painting the house, or she's doing something that shows that she is moving forwards. But they kind of just rely on the fact that she's now a godly woman, that she's a better person for it. It's like, well, we haven't seen anything that actually proves she's a better person. You've just kind of said she is. And why would we ever be like, oh yeah, she should have her kids back and have the CPS off her back? Because actually there was enough happening beforehand which made it absolutely clear that they did need to get involved. And that is one thing that I did like about this film, was that Monique, who plays Cynthia something, the CPS woman, was really great, because she showed how hard it is to be in a job like that, where she isn't the bad guy, she isn't trying to take your kids away from you, but she sees children that are in a vulnerable position and needs to step in. And that's why the horror elements don't work in this film, because the kids then get possessed, and then obviously CPS don't believe her that these bruises came from the fact that they were possessed, and it takes away from the real story of a struggling mother who is actually needing help and has done some bad stuff, and it could be a redemption story about that. But because you bring this possession stuff in, we instantly are like, well, it's not her fault because they're possessed and there's a demon and the demon's doing all the bad stuff. But you've set the whole film up that actually it's much more about the realistic stuff that happens within a family. And so it's just like such a confusing message of like what we're supposed to think.
I think I mean, on reflection, I could be wrong, but I think the way the film's structured as well, I think it, even though you see explicit scenes of her battling demons and whatnot, the film is also structured in a way where you could hand wave away a lot of the demon stuff, and it could literally be a tale about just abuse at home. And because the first time, do you remember that scene when Andra runs into a kid's rooms, and then you just cut away, and then Glenn Close walks in, and you just see the kids in the corner of the room get frightened of their mother, and the mother doesn't remember what had happened or whatever. So maybe there's some kind of like violent blackouts happening. It's just the filmmakers I think they've quite cleverly done it in a way where they don't necessarily paint the mother as a so they don't commit to whether this is actually a ghost story or whether it's just household domestic abuse. And I watched an interview with the real lady. There's a clip on YouTube that I watched, and I don't know, man. I mean, this is, maybe I'm getting a bit too personal here, and I don't have enough of a wide view of her life or whatever, but it's just purely based on the clip that I'd seen and the interviews that I've seen of some of the surrounding people that were involved in the story and whatnot. I don't know if I buy it. I don't know if I believe it. And some people were saying like how she was financially struggling. She just wanted to make a story to, and then that it's like that person just did not tally up with the portrayal that Andra Day gave in this movie.
No.
They just seemed like the movie almost felt like propaganda or like some kind of misrepresentation, like to make the character seem more sympathetic. But I don't know. Maybe
Interesting.
I don't know.
But then, it kind of would make sense. Like, okay, it would be really dark, but what if she actually was, she was drinking a lot in real life and she had abused her children, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but then she's trying to come up with a reason why they're scared and that stuff's happening, and then you say to CPS, oh, there's a possession happening. And I think I get your point about that there are definitely scenes in this film where it is Ebony who is the monster in some senses, because she does scare these children and do things that is not right. But what I would say is that would have been really good as a psychological thriller if they didn't make it so overt about there being demons in it, because we have watched films, like one that comes to mind is Run Rabbit Run. Do you remember that Australian film we watched where the sister dies and then the mother has a daughter, and the sister dies, and then the mother goes into this kind of psychotic break over the film. And that's a good example of genuinely not knowing whether this is a horror that's happening happening or a psychological thing, because nothing,
Yeah.
from my memory, nothing really happens that makes it overtly obvious that there's a ghost. It could all be in their heads. It could all, and that's where it works, because
Yeah.
I mean, that film had its downfalls as well, but in this film they make it so obvious that there are ghosts that you kind of takes away from the fact that this could be her.
Well, you see it. You
Yeah.
see the shadow monster thing, don't you?
Exactly. So if you'd taken that element away and made it more subtle, this really could be one of those films that really hits you hard. And I don't know if you've seen it on Disney Plus, but there's a new series that I've been watching called Grotesquerie, which is a Ryan Murphy series. You know, Ryan Murphy did American Horror Story and
Right.
Jeffrey Dahmer thingy.
Oh, okay.
He does all of that stuff. The Menendez brothers is one of his. And that is a really good example. And it ties quite nicely into this film because it's about a black detective and her life. And she's an alcoholic and she has a fraught relationship with her daughter. And they always talk about their relationship and their addictions and things. And, you know, I'm 3/4 of the way through it and you're still not sure if it's a horror or not because it's so unsettling, but nothing has happened that's overtly supernatural. You just get these feelings that something is weird, or is it all in their heads because they're in a haze of their addictions or whatever it might be. And I think that's where this would have been a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah. I think as we're speaking, I'm coming around more to the idea that I think the filmmakers have made a film about domestic abuse. I think that's what they've done. But I think to avoid any legal matters, they've very sloppily added a horror element to it.
Right, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Just as an escape clause or a get out of jail free card, because the horror stuff is so, maybe I don't know, maybe just the sloppiness of it is intentional. So, you know, maybe they expect viewers to be intelligent enough to see through it. And both of us have commented how this would be a great, just, you know, domestic movie about, you know, relationships between a mother and a daughter and the 3 grandchildren. And maybe the horror element is intentionally crap.
To try and badly mask it. I mean, if that was the case, I would rather him, because if the issue is that he's taking a true story and he has made up his mind maybe about what actually happened and he's trying to kind of convey it in some way without getting into legal trouble, I would say that it would be better if he just made up a story and didn't say that this was a true story and
he's changed all
reign.
the names. All the names are changed.
Yeah, but even if he was worried about that, just don't use the true story. You could very easily say, just make up your own story and then do what you wanted with it without having to like mask it behind any horror elements, if that's what you wanted to do. And like you said, if you read the true story of it and went, yeah, you know, it's a run-of-the-mill possession story, like he's kind of boxed himself in that way by choosing a story that is essentially a run-of-the-mill possession, and he has to work within the confines of that. And I sometimes think, is it worth being a true story if the story that's being told, is it worth telling again? I don't know if that's really harsh.
Yeah, I mean, you're going on the assumption that the creative team have integrity.
Yeah.
So if this, I think, I mean, actually, no, I'm projecting an assumption there. Sorry, it's not.
No,
you,
I think
yeah. And I think if you add based on a true story to any horror movie, it gives extra points and you know, makes people, you know, I'm pretty sure you could make up a horror story and just say based on a true or inspired by true events.
Inspired by true events. It's like if you take one element of every single one of these events, it happened at some point.
Yeah, because I think at the end when they show a picture of the house, when they show a picture of the I don't know if they show a picture of the lady, but I think the locations changed, the names have changed, the house looks nothing like the real house, and I think it's I don't know. I had a question actually. So it turns out that the real house where this is based, it's now been demolished, but I think the person that demolished it, I think they bought it for like $35,000, which is, you know, buying a house for $35,000 is like peanuts these days.
I think I know what your question is going to be.
Yeah, you already do. But it's kind of would you buy a house for cheap knowing that it's haunted?
Do you know what's so funny? I had a conversation about this at the weekend. I think yes.
Right.
Because I'm not convinced I believe in ghosts.
Right.
So it could go one of two ways.
Yeah,
I could move into this house and have my my assumptions either like that I go in and I'm not scared at all and I don't think that ghosts exist and fine. But because I'm so on the edge of knowing what it could be, like, could I then go the other way and just absolutely hate living in that house because I think that this house is haunted? Like, I don't know where I stand because I think I don't believe in them, but I've never really been tested otherwise.
Yeah.
But if the house was like, I don't know, even £60,000 or like £70,000, like, that is a life-changing thing to have a house for that amount. And obviously depends on the house, but like, maybe I'm shallow enough to say that I probably would buy it because that's a crazy, like,
cheap price.
Cheap price. And also, like, in these old houses, like, I live in a really old house. I don't know if somebody died in here or not saying that there was like a possession or anything here, but somebody might have died. I've never asked, but
I mean, odds are, if you've got a house that's over 100 years old, there's a likelihood that maybe somebody had passed away in it at some point. So,
and I've never felt scared in this house.
Yeah.
So maybe not. Would you?
I was thinking about it as well. I think what I would do is I would buy it, but I would rent it out.
So you'd be a businessman about it.
Oh yeah. But I would never mention to anybody that the house is allegedly haunted. Any tenant, I would never mention it, and it'd be interesting to see just if they bring something up.
Yeah.
Or if
scientifically prove whether ghosts exist by having a test group of people in the house.
have a control group and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you would feel bad though if, like, you didn't tell them and then they were like, oh, I haven't slept for like 2 weeks and something really weird is going on and I think I'm going crazy. And then you're like, so I got something to tell you. I actually knew all along that the house was haunted and I let you live here.
I think in the contract, I don't even know if I would say that. I think in the contract I'd have like a 1-month break clause. So like, if they want to leave after
okay, so you're being nice
with
about
a month's notice, I'd be like totally fine with it. And I might even just refund them their deposit or their last month's rent if they do discover it.
I really do feel though that if you walk into a house, and this isn't even to do with ghosts, but I think if you walk into a house and you feel comfortable and you feel like that's somewhere you could live, that would be the indicator of whether I would buy that house or not. If I had the knowledge that there was a possession there and I walked in and I felt creeped out, there's no point in buying that house because you'll always walk in there feeling creeped out because that's just like the way that house makes you feel. Whereas if you walk in and go, oh, it's nice, I don't have those feelings, then you're probably going to be okay because that's just the way that you feel about the house. But do people have to? I'm sure that's not true. You don't have to say.
Well, like declare
ghosts, because who knows?
I was thinking the same thing a second ago, actually. I don't. All right, I have no idea. I've not researched this, but I got a feeling that in America you have to. Maybe
that sounds like an American thing.
I can totally believe it
says
being true.
There's no specific legal requirement in the UK that mandates the disclosure of paranormal activity or hauntings when selling a property, and that's from Fine and Country.
Yeah, I mean, I've bought and sold a few places, and the application forms that you fill in have never asked a question about paranormal stuff.
Yeah. It just goes on to, you don't have to declare paranormal activity, but this is all the stuff you do have to declare.
Yeah.
But they do say that, like, if your house is old and it does have ghost stories, it could be a deterrent to people. So I think they're kind of hinting, like, maybe don't mention it if you don't have to.
Yeah, or just write on the form, not haunted.
Definitely not haunted. Please live here. We're fine.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
So all in all,
I give Lee Daniels a lot of benefit of the doubt because I did like Precious a lot, and it stuck with me for a long time after watching it. And I would say that I was hooked on this film in terms of the first two thirds, just really enjoying the dialogue, really enjoying the narrative that was being built, and the story was very compelling. And so I was happy watching it. And there have been films where pretty much straight away what type of film it's going to be, and this was the opposite of that, where it really felt like it was going in a good direction and it suddenly fell off. And so that's why I was more annoyed than I usually am, but it actually meant that I enjoyed more of the film than I have done in the past when it comes to these films. So for that reason, I wouldn't say it was an absolute bust. I think I enjoyed watching it. Like you say, Glenn Close, for that alone, just to see her in this role, and clearly, like, it was a fun role to play. It was a very different thing than I've seen her in before. I think she's been in one thing that was fairly similar, but that that was fun. That was good
Yeah.
to see her in. The acting was amazing. It was a very well done film, apart from all the things that we've said. So I'm mixed, but I wouldn't recommend this. And I don't say that very often. I always say, oh, you should give it a chance. But I think there are films out there that are better. Watch Precious if you want a film about, a family that's fraught with all sorts of things. That is a beautiful film. You can find that in other films, even just by Lee Daniels. So yeah, I'm going to say I'm not going to recommend it. What about
Yeah.
you?
I think if you're not a horror fan and you're kind of new to this haunted house kind of genre, I don't think it's a bad move to start off on, because it's kind of like a medium, or not even medium, it's like on the low end of scary.
Yeah.
And I think, I think the performances and script kind of saved this movie. But yeah, the climax of the movie is kind of lame. It's just, I think they just run out of ideas by that point. And I mean, I don't think there are any jump scares in the movie. It's fairly tame on the scariness. It's just more of a drama that just happens to have a bit of craziness in there. But yeah, if you're new to it, yeah, go for it. You'll have a good time. But if you enjoy horror, man, there's a million films that have done this better, the haunted house thing better, like the Conjuring movies, and I'm sure there's various other ones we've reviewed that just do this a lot better and are actually scary.